I think it's funny that we're still giving the disclaimer wherever you get your podcasts. Because what's a podcast where you can't get it everywhere?
Joe Rogan.
Oh.
Welcome to Spinsters, a podcast where Joel Embiid finally has a real point guard. I'm John Gonzalez, and Haley O'Shaughnessy is here.
I love that you introduced me because I was thinking back to how when we were on Heat Check, which is a podcast that Gonz let me come on very graciously, even though I had literally no experience and probably should not have been on it. It was nice because you just would, to keep, I guess, the point guard theme, would just lob ball. You know, I would just get like the easiest. It was so much easier. And now that you have a podcast and you have to put together a sentence to tee up other people putting together sentences, it's just complicated. So thank you for coddling me once again.
No, it required very little effort on my part. You're a pro. And I'm so excited, one, to be on this podcast because I love it, but two, to see your meteoric rise. I always knew that you would be a superstar. And now here's the proof.
Oh my God, stop. We are, speaking of superstars, we were doing a 1-and-1, a home and home. Mm-hmm. I was on Gonz's excellent new podcast, Sports Illustrated Weekly, to talk Nets Sixers. We're going to do more of that today. Does that podcast come out Monday or Tuesday?
It comes out Wednesday. So
Wednesday.
As people are listening to your podcast, get prepared for Sports Illustrated Weekly, which drops every Wednesday. Please listen and subscribe. Yeah.
Okay, so technically in recording sequences, this is the part 2, but because this is going to go first, we'll just call this the prequel because that's very much part 1. So we're having like a Star Wars situation here.
I love it.
So I guess obviously you're a Sixers fan. And we'll just state the obvious that for those of you who are only on Facebook and see memes weeks late, last week, the Sixers and Nets did a little trade. The Sixers got James Harden and Paul Millsap, who's just complete career crash is something in itself that I would love to talk about. And the Nets received Ben Simmons, Seth Curry, Andre Drummond, and 2 first-round picks. So Morey was really doing everything he could, and he made it happen, which is great. There's a lot we want to get into here, but first, let's talk about feelings.
Okay. I love to talk about feelings.
How are you feeling?
I feel amazing. This is so great. It's very exciting. Being a Sixers fan, Haley, as you know, because you and I have worked together for a while, it's trying, right? It's one of those things where it's not for the faint of heart. There's always something crazy happening, like a player who like almost dies because he ate a peanut, you know, and like guys whose shots break and, you know, can't play, and, you know, they draft people and they tend not to play in their first year for a variety of medical reasons. So for this to happen with players of this magnitude, for it to work out at a time when, you know, it felt like it was stitched together pretty late, I'm amazed that it got done at all and thrilled that it did. So yeah, I'm excited to see this thing come to fruition.
Do you feel like this is it after the last decade?
What does it mean?
Like this is the final iteration of this Sixers team's projection to success.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I think about it more as Joel Embiid has long, but like let me put it this way. Not long ago, Joel Embiid uttered the sentence, "Ish Smith is the best point guard I've ever played with." So we're so far removed from that, right? Like that's something that Joel Embiid said one time and everybody was like, "Oh God, they got to get him some help." And we all thought it was going to be Ben Simmons. And as everybody who listens to your podcast is quite aware of, Ben Simmons regressed as a shooter. I mean, he became, not only did he not work on his game, but he became less willing to shoot, not just, you know, at the floor, but getting to the line. Like he was crippled in that postseason series against the Atlanta Hawks last season when he was afraid to get fouled because he didn't want to go to the free throw line. So the whole point of this is that Ben Simmons wasn't that guy, and I believe James Harden will be that guy.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I was asking, which is, I think, remarkable in some ways. And then also for you guys to be able to hold that into your heart because you've had so many letdowns. Mm-hmm. But then again, there is a very Nixian thing going on here where Sixers fans will just accept and wholeheartedly support whatever is coming their way.
Yeah.
but with a little bit of more of like a pessimistic vibe to it. Knicks fans will pretend quite a bit, whereas you guys will lean the other way and pretend that everything is the worst it's ever been, and then it's the best it's ever been. There's no casual Sixers fan, is the way to say it. Like nobody, you'll never meet one who's not a diehard.
No, it's all extremes. You're 100% right about that. I mean, the guys who play for the Sixers invariably are the best unless they're not performing well, and then they're the worst, but only we can say that. Like if you said it, people would get upset at you, but secretly we would know that you were right. We would just prefer to be the ones saying it ourselves.
Yeah, well, that's the lovely thing about sports. But it has been quite a wild last decade for you all. And so I wanted to play a game where we go through, I'm just going to say a word or a phrase, and I just want you to tell me what emotion it sparks from you. There are no wrong answers. Okay.
All right, this is dangerous. Go ahead.
Okay. Number 1, Nerlens Noel.
What emotions? I guess a little sadness because it didn't work out. I like Nerlens a lot. I think he's a good dude. And I was really bummed for him when he didn't take that contract in Dallas. But cause take the bag when you can get it. But I would have liked it to work out with Nerlens here. I say here like I'm still in Philadelphia. I lived in Los Angeles for 6 years.
Oh, but here is here. That's even when I'm not in Kentucky. Kentucky
here
is
here. Still home. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Nerlens is an interesting one because he had so much support, and then reports kind of came out later that he was not always the best teammate to work with. He was kind of difficult for the team. And then I hope in OKC he grew up a little bit. And then in August, Rich Paul said that there was no chance that there was going to be a Sixers reunion because they reached out about him.
Yeah, that would have been great. I mean, he'd be a great backup for Joel Embiid, and especially now when, as you mentioned, those backup minutes that previously were going to Andre Drummond are now going to Paul Millsap, who I had forgotten was still in the league. Yeah. I would much rather prefer Nerlens, but what can you do? Yeah.
So that was 2015. So that's about a little earlier on in the decade of, I'm trying to think of like what to call it. Decade of down, decade of process, I don't know. I'll come up with something by the end. Okay. Our next buzzword is going to be neurogenic thoracic outlet syndrome.
Is that what Markelle Fultz had?
Yes.
Wow. My feeling there is sure. I mean, like you just rattled off something and I was like, yeah, see, that's another thing that felt like there's been so many things that have felled the Sixers over this last however long since the process began. And for that to have happened was just one in a very long line of WTF moments where you're just like, I don't understand what's happening with this team. I have said this before. I'm quite certain I will say it again. The Sixers have not won a championship in a long time, but they are the perennial leaders in drama.
You really can't. And it's like how dramatic each thing gets, because almost every team at this point has had a player who wants out, right? Just to go back to our current situation. But it's the lengths that it goes with the Sixers. And that unfortunately is true of injury too. So Markelle Fultz was 2017 on this timeline. He was the first overall pick, which I always think makes it hurt more.
It's painful.
Yeah, absolutely. He played only, do you remember how many how many games he played with a team? I can give it to you. I've got it right here.
With the Sixers? Curious.
Yeah.
20?
33.
Oh, that's more than I would have guessed.
He either had the strangest injury or the most publicly covered case of basketball yips in history.
Maybe A and B together. I mean, I don't know, but somehow the Sixers drafted not one but 2 point guards first overall, and neither of them could shoot. Not only could they not shoot, they forgot how to shoot. Previously, they could shoot a little bit and then like completely fell off the shooting cliff, which if you did that one time, a fan base would be like, man, that's really awful luck. 2 times, Haley. 2 times they did that.
The fact that Markelle won't go down as the worst shooting situation in Sixers history is so bizarre because I could never wrap my head around it. Like for 2 years straight, I just did not understand what was going on. And he's not even the weirdest thing to happen in the Sixers. Okay, next one. 4 bounces.
Oh, that's just pain. And you know what? That's mean that you would make me relive this.
I'm sorry.
You know what? Now that you and I are no longer employed by our previous company, I will say, like, they tasked me at the time with writing the oral history of Kawhi's 4-bounce Game 7 winner. And in retrospect, that's some real Stockholm syndrome shit. Like, why am I getting that assignment? I should be the last person who should get that assignment. They should send me off for therapy afterwards. But yes, I was there in Toronto that night, and I was up in the perch in the press box, and I was watching it with Surratt, and like we had a vantage point where you could see perfectly what was happening, right? And the ball was up there so long, it bounced for so long that I had enough time to turn to the person next to me and say, "Oh, we're going to overtime." And then it fell, and I was like, "Oh, I guess we're not." So like, that's how long the ball was bouncing.
Oh my God.
And
terrible.
It was awful. It was awful. And if not for that shot, who knows? Maybe the Sixers win the series. Maybe they end up with a championship, but fate intervened against them.
It is probably one of the more interesting what ifs because a lot of them came around. Another word I was going to have on here was just rookie seasons. And that's just to, like you made a reference to earlier, Embiid missed his first 2 seasons. Ben missed his first season. Yep. So a lot of the other what ifs kind of played out fine. I mean, Embiid could be the MVP.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Ben Simmons, it's not like his career was stunted by injury necessarily. So it's not like, so I'll just let that what if play out. Okay, here's another one.
Mm-hmm. Are there any good ones in here?
I think that's kind of the point. No offense. It's just that you guys have been through so much. This one is funny. Collars.
Oh, collars. I thought you were saying.
Yeah, sorry, that's the Kentucky.
Yeah, collars.
Collar.
That's a normal collar. Find a new slant. That's hilarious. And yeah, okay. So here's another like crazy thing that happens, right? Where the 76ers employed a general manager who either he or his wife or some combination of the two had a ton of burner accounts where they just like talk shit about their own players and ended up getting fired as a result of this. And I remember where I was when this happened, Haley. I was in San Francisco or Oakland rather for whatever year that was for the NBA finals. Right. And I'm covering it for our former employer, and we're at the finals and nobody was talking about the finals. And everybody was like, "Hey, did you hear what happened with Brian Colangelo's burner accounts?" So sure.
Yes. So that was Brian Colangelo who took over for Hinkie 2016 to 2018. Ben Dietrich wrote this expose for The Ringer that was fucking
amazing.
Crazy. It was amazing. I mean, it was so detailed. And obviously that's because you can't put something out there if you're not super, super sure about it. I mean, I guess you can't be 100% sure about the specifics. Like was it his wife? Was it him? It was definitely him. And I remember when, I think it was like months before, it might be weeks before, and I'm just misremembering, but months before, Chris Ryan and I were talking about it, and he was like, "We have this piece, but it's just, we have to like double and triple and check and everything." And I remember when he told me about it, I thought it was not, there's no way that it was actually him, because how could you be so stupid?
Yeah. How could you be so stupid is a great point. And you know what? Like, the NBA forced not one, but 2 Colangelos on the 76ers franchise because the Sixers had deigned to try to set themselves up for the future by creating the process with Sam Hinkie. And the owners of the Sixers, Josh Harris and David Blitzer, had like empowered Sam Hinkie and had gone through like some rough losing seasons, and they gather all these picks together. And then all of a sudden, like, the league gets upset about what's happening and they force Hinkie out and bring in this guy who somehow is supposed to be the savior and like put a professional face on the Sixers. And look what you got, Adam Silver. Thanks so much.
Yeah. It was probably the most embarrassing. I mean, do I think it's more embarrassing than the Kevin Durant burner expose? Yes, because
sure.
you're not getting that pressure yourself, of the team doing bad. Like you are, but not to the same degree a player would be. I think the funnier things of it were that he or his wife would, defend his large collars, like the keyword I used. That was actually so funny for so long that it became to be unfunny to me when people would reference it on Twitter. A little bit like The Hangover. You're like, wow, this was really funny. And now, is it that funny? Like, I've heard it so much, but it is actually so funny.
It will always be hilarious.
It will always be hilarious. He actually blamed his wife for it though, which have you ever heard the phrase, there are vow days and there are wow days? That's a fucking vow day if I ever heard one.
He clearly has not. I mean, now he's banished to Australia where he's, owning a team there or whatever. But yeah, I mean, like, in what world is he like, you know what? I got an idea. This has gone really south for me. I'm going to make it better by throwing my wife under the bus. Like, I don't know about his marriage. That would not work in my marriage.
I really hope that they talked about that. But yeah, that's such a bad look. I mean, you're going to get fired either way. You're going to be humiliated either way. Might as well save the marriage.
Yeah.
Oh, that leads me to my next one, which is a little bit obvious. It's the process.
Happy, full heart. Like, it makes me feel, our friend Mike Levin and Spike Eskin do the Rights to Ricky Sanchez podcast. And they started, it's a great podcast and they have an awesome theme song. And in the beginning of the theme song, it's like, we were right, y'all. Even when it went wrong, we were right. That's how all Sixers fans feel about the process. Like, people who are not Sixers fans or who are not Philadelphians go, the process didn't work. They haven't won anything, whatever. I would argue to you, the process is still working. I mean, I literally have written the process ended about 15 times, right? Because there were all these events. Jimmy Butler came. That was the end of the process. They traded Jimmy Butler. That was the end of the process, and on and on and on. But this is all a continuation of everything that Sam Hinkie began. And I'm a huge Hinkie fan. And I think that what he did was revolutionary, and he got drummed out of town for it, and he's still not back in the league, and it's criminal because he's one of the smartest people I know. And the whole thing was, hey, we want to win a championship. We don't want to be in the mediocre middle anymore. What's the best way to do that? This is the best way. And from an academic perspective, it made sense then, and it makes sense now.
Yeah, he was a revolutionary. I, in group chats and things that I will not say here, have definitely compared him to communist leaders, like good communists. Because I'm like, the good commies, okay. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Not the bad ones, but yes. Anyway, that's what I meant when I was saying, is this it? Because the process was seen as one era, and then it's actually a continuation of that era. And part of me wonders, is this when it's actually going to play out? I think as long as Joel Embiid is your team's leader, you can say that it's ongoing. I don't know what the obsession is with ending it, although I've said it a million times myself.
I mean, look, Joel Embiid is the cornerstone of the process. He literally nicknamed himself the process. So as long as he's around, then there's always going to be some ties to that era. And by the way, he might already be, when he tweeted the RIP Bozo meme after Ben Simmons got traded, and then he was asked about it, and he goes, oh, I just thought that man was well-dressed. The man is a treasure. He might be, Haley, and this is just really saying something, because there's been some really very popular athletes in Philadelphia history. Allen Iverson was my favorite one when I was coming up. He might already be the most popular athlete in Philadelphia history, which is mind-blowing.
If he wins you one, I think he will be.
He might be even without it. Yeah. He might be.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely more tapped into that than me. But yes, he is the process. And that's just, it is a testament, everything that is still happening today, even though it's been touched by more GMs and coaches and players and trades. It is a testament to Sam Hinkie, who was so rogue, like you're saying, that the league kicked him out. They forced him out. And other NBA owners were like, I want this guy out. And he was just losing on purpose. And they were still like, he needs to get out because he's ruining our lottery chances. You watched Ted Lasso?
Of course.
The first time I saw Rebecca, I was like, that's Sam Hinkie. Fucking tanking on purpose.
Wow. Didn't expect that. Hadn't thought of that before. That's what makes you you. And I'm sure that Sam and the actor who plays her would be equally flattered by it.
You can only hope. I have, I think, two more.
Okay.
One is gonna hurt.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And it's not this one. This one's, I'm curious about your reaction to this one. Sesame.
Oh, that's what I was talking about earlier. God, what was his name?
Zaire Smith.
Yeah, Zaire Smith. Yeah. So I was in Philly to report a different story about the Sixers. And I got a tip about this, that Zaire Smith had consumed some sesame products when he wasn't supposed to, and had lost north of 20 pounds, where he's a really skinny kid. And that doesn't sound great, right? My feeling on that is what? What confusion. What do you mean you fed him sesame off the line? Did nobody check on this? And it's a shame because there was high hopes for Zaire Smith. They had traded Mikal Bridges to get Zaire Smith. Bridges had gone to Villanova. His mom worked for the organization. He would be a perfect fit on that team then and now. Mm-hmm. And they were no, it's going to be Zaire Smith. And he's taken out by a rogue sesame allergy.
I remember when that draft night was so sad. I just realized that because a lot of the time we find out on TV and at home and on our phones that players have been traded or are going to be traded before they do. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we know before we know about a immediate draft night trade. So yes, he's walking up and he's going to have a Sixers hat on and he thinks he's being drafted by the Sixers. We all know he's not. I would imagine that's very upsetting. But did they know that there was sesame in it and that he was allergic? I can't remember the specifics. I just remembered it seeming pretty reckless.
From what I understand, or from what I remember, I'd have to go back and check my reporting on it. But from what I remember, it was he ate something off the line, because you're at the team facility, the practice facility, and there's a whole bunch of different foods that you can grab. And they had food that was always specially prepared for him. But I think he grabbed something that wasn't specially prepared for him. And therein lies the rub. He has a terrible reaction. He never really plays for the Sixers. And, that's yet another story where you're that story is number 14 on the craziest things that have happened to the Sixers in the last 10 years.
Which leads me to my final trip down history lane, probably the earliest of all of definitely the earliest of all of these. My word is bowling.
Oh, Andrew Bynum, right? Yeah. Probably a top 5 what the hell happened moment. But my feeling on that is, once again, sure, because nothing in retrospect surprises me about what's going on with the Sixers. So Andrew Bynum, prior to Sam Hinkie coming along, the new ownership comes in, and Andrew Bynum at the time was a really good basketball player. And they acquire Andrew Bynum, and everybody expects that he's going to be just a world beater for the Sixers, leaves the Lakers, and never plays for the Sixers, ends up getting hurt. And everybody thought, well, he's going to be okay. And then all of a sudden there's stories about him hurting himself bowling, and then he's in Spain dancing. Do you remember those videos?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, it was really tough. The whole time, I never think it changed from knee. It was just variations of his knee injury, but I could be wrong. And what I remember is that it all turned out to have started from him bowling.
Yeah.
Right?
He hurt himself bowling because of course he did. Right? Of course he hurt himself bowling. Of course they trade Mikal Bridges for a guy who has a sesame allergy and then is loses a bunch of weight. Of course they draft not 1 but 2 point guards who forget how to shoot. Right? Of course Nerlens Noel doesn't play in his first season. Of course.
Yeah, exactly. But now here we are to a new Sixers team, a new adventure. And it is a major, major, major shift. And I'm glad it's a major shift because after the Ben confusion, I guess I'll just call it to be nice, this team really had to do something revolutionary for it to be a step up and to kind of not a step up from what he had been giving you, but a step up from what the expectations of Ben Simmons were. So I guess that leads me to right now, what, they're fifth? Sixers are fifth in the standings.
Something like that. The
But
whole
it's
Eastern
tight.
Conference is super tight.
Yeah, but they look good. Like, I mean, they look great. Embiid's looks great. You no longer have Seth, who, if you listen to the pod we did for SI Weekly, you
Yes.
will realize I'm extremely high on. But when you consider that you're probably slotting in Harden to fill in for him, then you're in great hands. So how do you feel about the prospects for this immediate year? Or do you feel like you need to wait until Harden gets on the court? Because he's not playing until All-Star's over.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes, the Sixers announced that he would not be playing. He's going to rest his hamstring through the All-Star break. He's not going to play in the All-Star game, which is fine. Typically, trades of this magnitude don't yield championships right away. Like in-season trades, it usually takes a little time.
Toronto.
Typically, right? Toronto's an exception to that rule. There's exceptions to every rule. I'm hopeful that this will be yet another exception to the rule. I think that it's going to work out well. I'm in my optimistic Philadelphia fan component right now because, as you outlined, like Ben Simmons wasn't playing for them. They weren't getting anything from Ben Simmons, right? So in terms of like this season's team, they gave up Seth Curry, your guy who you are extremely high on, and please listen to Sports Illustrated Weekly to hear her testimonial, and Andre Drummond. And in exchange, you're getting James Harden. So on paper, that would be like a really good, valuable on-court trade for them, right? He should be value added for the Sixers. So I'm excited to see how that works out.
I actually I do think that the Nets, I would rather be the Nets right now, I guess, on the end of this trade. But I do think it's appropriate, all that they gave up, because it is significant to give up Seth Curry, 2 first-round draft picks, and Andre Drummond, you always have solid rebounding. I guess you can say that no matter what. And Ben Simmons, who at this point was just dead weight with a lot of resentment attached, but, to someone else is someone with a great deal of potential. But I do think it's appropriate at this time for Daryl Morey because you have to show Embiid, and this is like kind of the cliche that we always go into, you have to show your star that you are going to set him up to win. And nobody's not going to set you up if it's not Daryl Morey.
Yeah. I mean, look, Daryl, I had said all along that Daryl Morey, I believe in Daryl Morey as much as I believe in Sam Hinkie. Daryl Morey has been one of the best general managers in the NBA since 2006. I was getting a little nervous, Haley. I was one of those people where like every trade that came along, like before Malcolm Brogdon had signed his extension, he was still available. And it was like him and Karis LeVert and like a pick. I was like, sure. When it was either Halliburton or De'Aaron Fox, I was like, sure. Atlanta came in and they were talking about John Collins. I would have done that. Like, but so all these trades are out there in the ether and I would have pulled the trigger on all of them. And Daryl Morey, bless his heart, is so much smarter than me because he kept saying over and over again, we're not going to rush it. We need to return a superstar, not just a star, when we trade Ben Simmons because he's a big trade chip. And I was getting nervous and he was very much right and I was very much wrong. And I could not be happier about that.
Yeah, which is great. And I do think it's interesting, the recalibration, or maybe this is just some degree posturing, but the recalibration of what he wanted in return. But, that's James Harden. Like, you can give up picks and not get them back and it'd still be an appropriate trade. I do, though, I am more excited for the Nets. I think if only because I want them to be good and I already have seen the Sixers have success this season. But with the Nets, I mean, it's just there's so many weird things about this. They teamed up. When has this ever happened that a super team teamed up, picked a spot, was like, great, we're going to go here, and only plays 16 games together over 2 years because of multiple reasons. One being horrific injury, and then a subtler injury that still seems quite serious, actually. Another one being that they picked New York. A global pandemic was happening.
Yeah.
Was it happening when they picked it? Yeah. No. No, that was the summer before. Had they known, maybe they would have went to a more conservative place.
Yeah, time stopped having any meeting. I don't remember where I was or what I was doing.
Yeah, it's hard. 2019 to 2021 are pretty all together.
Down the memory hole.
I was saying this on Twitter and people were upset. And I'm not saying that it's not wrong that Kyrie is not getting the vaccine. I would love for him to get it just for his personal safety and the safety of people around him. But like, we have to factor in players' personalities to what I'm saying. And what I'm saying is it is wild that if they had said, hey, let's go do this in, what's a team that would have had space? Let's make this happen in Minnesota and make them get rid of everything. Then they would have been allowed to do this. No problem. Kyrie could have played at home. He just couldn't have played in a couple games in New York. But he's in the Western Conference now, so it doesn't matter. Just pair of games. I mean, isn't that crazy?
Yeah. I mean, fate intervenes in strange ways. To your point about a super team that never really got off the ground, they play 16 games together. They're 13-3 when they play together. And like, they just decided, nah, let's detonate it. I mean, or James Harden decided, no, I've had enough.
That's what's shocking to me. I mean, how much is so much that you're saying, hey, maybe actually, like, I just don't think it's going to happen for us? Because I said this when we were on your pod, they were the title favorites up until the trade, which is the title favorites. They're the 8th seed in the East. Yeah,
they still have to get into the playoffs.
Yeah. So I think the expectations for them were reasonable, but he must have really seen, like, maybe Katie's injury is worse than we think. Maybe Kyrie, I would get frustrated with that, of course. But I just want to know what's going on. I want to skip ahead to the documentary.
Oh, I can't wait. This is 8 delightful, to 12 years. Delightful and delicious. And like, you know, we are consumers of the NBA, but we also create content, and this is tremendous content.
This is tremendous content. So I want for the very end of this, I want you to take your brain and just reverse it back to when you liked and supported Ben Simmons.
Okay.
And saw the good in him.
Sure.
And let's assume that any of the refusal to participate is gone.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think he's going to fit here with Seth? And let's assume that, I mean, it's tough because sometimes Kyrie won't play, sometimes he will play. I guess just in their various situations, how do you think he could fit?
Yeah, I mean, in theory, he's somebody who would pair really well with Kyrie and KD, right? Because he's really good at a lot of things on the basketball court. I mean, he's awesome in the open floor. He's a fantastic passer. He's a great rebounder. He's like an extraordinary defender. He can defend anybody 1 through 5. You know, he's matchup and switch proof. All of those things are to the good. The question is, how are they going to deploy him, and will he want to be deployed that way, right? Because we've seen in the past, he got like a little antsy in the playoffs when they had to take the ball out of his hands because he didn't want to shoot and he didn't want to go to the free throw line. And like you mentioned, you brought up the Toronto series where they lose to Kawhi in the 7 or the 4 bouncer. They had to make Jimmy Butler the effective point guard in that series, and they basically put Ben along the baseline in the dunker spot, and he hated that. He said, I'm better than that. You know, I'm not going to be that guy. I'm a star in this league. So if he wants to be star in this league, Ben Simmons, instead of just like some version of like the Nets Draymond Green, then I think it's not going to be a great fit. But if he plays the Draymond Green role, he could be really good.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I made this comparison to you earlier. I think this is a great opportunity for him to pull a Wiggins reset. Yeah. For his own expectations, I would say he's probably dramatically been humbled through this entire thing. I don't think it's been fair on either side for either party. I don't think it's entirely been fair. But I will say that there's really nothing like years of just getting shit on to make somebody say, maybe I should try something different or just do something that'll make me be liked by a fan base for once. I definitely think that Wiggins's was also a matter of like, that's a good environment. Everyone knows that. Everyone knows that you'd want to be on the Warriors. It's just a good team environment. People get along generally, except for the KD year. But I also have heard like KD's a great teammate. So I hope that this situation, regardless of what situation it is, he could be thrown in the middle of the ocean castaway style, only has a volleyball. He's got to knock out his teeth.
That's
and he would still be in
so
a better
dark.
situation. I'm just saying, you don't need to be somewhere where everyone hates you. And you also, as fans, you want to know that you have forward movement. So I get it from both sides. But I really hope that the Wiggins glow down happens for him, because Wiggins is an all-star now.
Yes, he is.
I'm winking.
On a podcast, yeah. No, I'm hopeful. Look, I don't harbor any resentment against Ben Simmons, and I want to note, by the way, because yes, it was an incredibly acrimonious divorce. There's no doubt about that. But before Ben Simmons took his ball and went home, Philadelphia fans were hyper supportive of Ben Simmons. Now, there was a debate about how good he actually was, but it's not like he was getting booed in games or anything. People were still supporting him. I would say, by Philadelphia standards, they were on their best behavior, because it could have gone south way sooner than this. It wasn't until he said, "I'm not playing for you anymore," that people went, "All right, buddy, let's really take a look in the mirror about who you are and who we are."
And speaking about Philadelphia well, I think that opens a bigger conversation about player autonomy and is it fair, the situation we put them in and everything. But what's more interesting to me is what you brought up last time. When did you say that they're playing each other again? March
10th.
And
yeah.
Where are you at on if he will play?
Oh man, I really want it to happen. I seriously doubt it will.
It's in Philly?
It's in Philly. Nets at Sixers, Wells Fargo Center. If it happens, call out the National Guard, grease all the light poles, do all the preventative measures,
get the dumpsters away from the streets.
Get rid of the dumpsters. You'd really have to probably chain 20,000 maniacs to their seats just to make sure that everything's safe for everybody.
Oh, yeah, some shit will get thrown.
I just don't think he's going to subject himself to that. I don't think he's ready for that yet, because it would be an incredibly intense atmosphere. And our former colleague Dan Devine had mentioned, when LeBron went back to Cleveland for the first time as a member of the Miami Heat and the vitriol that was thrown his way, times 10, 20, and some bigger exponent than that, because Cleveland is Cleveland, and all credit to Cleveland. Nobody can hate like Philadelphia.
Yeah.
We're experts at this.
Yeah, and you made me think about the tribute video or lack of. I don't know, because people make tribute videos for any former player, which I like. I think it's nice to be remembered for your time there, even if you weren't a major factor. But if you're a major negative factor, I don't know. I don't think I would do it if I don't have KD by my side. Yeah. If you don't have the makeup to win the game, I'm not doing it. I'm not going in there.
You need KD, you need Kyrie, and then you need to make sure that you're cool with this, right? Because look, and whatever was going on or is going on with him mentally when he said he wasn't mentally prepared to play for the Sixers, I always took that to mean I am not mentally prepared or willing to play in Philadelphia again, because I've had enough of this situation. Mm-hmm. If you're going to go back, you're going to be playing in Philadelphia, and you know what's going to happen. We all know what's going to happen. The next time he plays, he could sit out every game, Haley, against the Sixers in Philadelphia for the next 10 years. He could play, right?
That'd be so amazing.
12 years. And one day in the very distant future, finally play a game at the end of his career in Philadelphia for the first time ever. And people would then boo the living hell out of him, because we have long memories, and this will happen if he ever does it.
Yeah, that's true. It's just impossible to dissect what's going on in somebody's mind, and I hope that his inability to play in Philadelphia is just a part of a larger thing and not just purely the fans. But we'll see. I would love for it to happen, unless it's really bad for him, and then I guess I would hate for it to happen.
It would be right. I want him to be able to accept this thing that will happen and be okay with it afterwards. Mm-hmm. Right. But for us, just dispassionately, it would be so very entertaining to see this game.
It'd be really fun. Yeah. It'd be really fun.
Who wouldn't watch that game? The first time Ben Simmons comes back as a member of the Nets, the ratings would be outrageous.
That's also such a test of where you think you're at as a fan. Because everybody will be watching, like you said. You could very easily get kicked out and banned forever.
Oh, yeah. The banned forever numbers are going to be through the roof in that game.
Are you going to go?
I don't think I'll go. Although, I mean, it feels like it could be a great Sports Illustrated Weekly piece. If if I parachute into Philadelphia, that's always one of my favorite. I was basically the senior Philadelphia bureau correspondent for our former employer. So maybe I will be for Sports Illustrated. It could happen, maybe. If you come with me, I'll go.
Oh my God, of course.
We'll go rock out in Philly.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I miss talking to you every Monday morning.
Back at ya.
Yeah. But do you want to say anything else about your podcast? Why don't you plug your podcast and its conception and idea in a larger way?
Sure. Sports Illustrated Weekly, available wherever you get your podcasts. It is a weekly, every Wednesday, narrative style podcast. If you're familiar with HBO Real Sports, it's just like that, but a podcast where we're going to give you several reported stories every week. This week, on this Wednesday, we have the story of how a trip to Cabo made the Rams and Matt Stafford Super Bowl champions. I mean, this had been like kind of in the ether. It had been a part of legend for the last year, but nobody had ever really reported it out fully. We've done that. We're going to have the behind the scenes story of that trip and how it changed the fortunes for everybody. Ben Schwartz of Parks and Rec, now of The After Party, of Sonic 1 and 2, actor and comedian. He's a big Knicks fan. So he comes on to discuss Chris Herring's new excellent book about the Knicks, Blood in the Garden, which I recommend everybody go out and purchase. Even if you're not a Knicks fan, it's a lot of 90s NBA nostalgia in there. And then finally, we have a Heat Check reunion with one Haley O'Shaughnessy and Dan Devine. She's doing finger guns, and Isaac Lee to discuss this very topic here, the trade that rocked the NBA, James Harden and Ben Simmons. So stuff like that every week, a little something for everybody. Some stories are heavier than others. Some are super fun, like, just talking with my friends. So we're really proud of it, and so far so good.
It's really wonderful. Everybody should subscribe. Thanks, Gonz. I miss you.
I miss you too. This was so wonderful. 2 recordings in one day. We have to do this more often.
I'm going to stop recording, but don't leave because I want to talk shit for a little bit.
Okay.
Bye, everybody.
Spinsters is hosted by me, Jordan Liggins, and Haley O'Shaughnessy. This episode was produced by Isabel Joycelyn, Harry Krinsky, Alex Ward, Ashley Zhao, and me. Our production coordinator is Devin Shepard, and our executive producers are Peter Moses, John Yells, and Haley.
Hey, this is Cade from North Carolina, and I'm just calling. First of all, Jordan, Haley, and Harry, you guys are awesome. Thank you for the show. And I just wanted to call to tell Sacramento Kings fans that I am sorry about the Halliburton trade, but if they're looking for a new team, I would like to pitch for them to join the Charlotte Hornets fandom. First of all, you guys already look great in purple, so why not add some teal to that? We have an exciting young guard in LaMelo, who's basically like everything you love about Fox, but even better. Even though we've been really bad for a long time, something you can relate to as a Sacramento Kings fan. We're going in the right direction. And I really believe, small market to small market. If you guys are feeling desperate, need a new team, the Charlotte Hornets would love to have you. All right. Thanks. You guys are awesome. Bye.